I know we should be good from my end.
Okay.
Can you hear
Yep.
me?
Yep. And
Cool.
you're live.
All right.
Okay. Let's just get this shindig started. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Michelle Davis with Revolution Witness, and this is a Revolution Witness Roundtable. On May 25th, 2020, America witnessed the murder of George Floyd live on the internet. This was an event that impacted us all. Doesn't matter what part of the country you came from, skin color, political ideology. Everyone was affected by this. And this was also an event that America said, enough is enough. A new civil rights movement was born. And some of us have been paying attention for a long time. Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, Eric Gardner, Tamir Rice. Some of us have only noticed hashtags. Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Sandra Bland, Alton Sterling. And all of us have felt these deaths. This could have been your brother, your aunt, your child, your friend. Philando Castile, Stephon Clark, Botham Jean, Elijah McClain. The names just kept coming. Breonna Taylor, Daniel Prude, John Neville, Michael Ramos. And even after the murder of George Floyd, the names, the hashtags, they didn't stop. David McAtee, Rashard Brooks, Jonathan Price, Andre Hill. There's more names than anybody can even remember. And every single one of these names had a life. Every single one of these names had a family. And so today I'm joined from around the country from journalists and live streamers. Each one of them have been documenting the things that mainstream media hasn't covered. And even though they're all parts of, from Florida to California, different parts of America, they have all witnessed and documented the same exact issues: police corruption, far-right extremism, civil rights abuses, racial injustice. And I think that the most important thing that America has to understand the scope of these issues, because these issues are not unique to Dallas. They're not unique to Kenosha or Sacramento or Louisville. These are real problems that all of America faces in every city, in every town. So let's just jump in here. Jessica, let's start with you. Why don't you introduce ourselves and tell us where you're from.
So Jessica, I am currently living in Denton, which is north of the Dallas-Fort Worth area, about 50 miles, and about 50 miles south of the Oklahoma border. I have been, as a scholar and activist, involved in activism in the DFW region for the last 15 years, since moving to Denton as a scholar. Had my entire perspective of thinking I understood race relations in our nation and in my state, really getting some intense privilege checks once I discovered that I lived in a city within a city, that my experience as a white individual was not the experience of everyone. And as I got to know more about the nature of white power and the way it manifests itself locally within local institutions and systems of government, particularly through my scholarly endeavors, activism just seemed like a calling that was here nor there. I mean, yeah, for me, once you have the knowledge and you understand, for me, it becomes a moral and spiritual obligation to act. And so I have been documenting the BLM movement here in the region since it started, mostly because I was just shocked by the lack of coverage from local press. Calling and saying, hey, there's 100 dudes here in fatigues, all white, carrying long arm weapons, surrounding peaceful Black protesters, pointing them, and them telling me to call back if any violence broke out. And I'm like, that is violence. I mean, why do we have to wait till someone's dead? That is violence, right? And so that too was a real eye opener for me, and just the need to document what's going on and make sure that even the microaggressions that a lot of more privileged individuals don't understand, I think the more that I've been focused on trying to share those, right? So as to kind of burst this bubble of whiteness and that just kind of predominates the narrative, and bring those things to light. So yeah, document, denormalize, and expose. That's my goal. That's my mantra moving forward. And that's what I do.
So in a deep South state like Texas, racial injustice has persisted for so long that most of the opposition that you see in Texas is from neo-Confederates. Do you think there is enough awareness to the severity of the racial injustices in Texas?
No. I mean, when you have individuals like former McKinney Council person Lashadi and Shimwell, who was just recently removed, but with, some pretty questionable tactics by the city of McKinney Council, to remove this Black man who was legally voted into office. But when you have city council people issuing Black states of emergency declarations, saying that if you don't live or have to travel through North Texas as a person of color, please avoid this area. I think that the reality of the situation is not really been, afforded the credence it deserves. And I have to tell you that even as somebody who considers themselves fully immersed in the activism, it never ceases to amaze me, as I get involved with cases and some of the advocacy work that I do, the level of, I used to say, white power does not necessarily mean white conspiracy. But more and more these days, I'm starting to think that it has to, because at some degree, we are now living in an age where ignorance no longer works. We can't say, oh, I didn't realize the Confederacy was racist, or I just don't see it that way, or I didn't realize. Everyone's aware, and it's being allowed to perpetuate because a lot of people are just choosing to not make it the conversation. But I think that outside of Texas, that's where we need more attention, outside of these hotspot areas in the South where Black and brown people are still disappearing overnight, where Black children are disappearing still. And we don't get headline news articles about it. 2 years later, we're still trying to solve these mysteries by ourselves with private investigators. That's where I think the attention is lacking, and the stories just aren't being told. We get lots of the sensational stories, but the truth is, I mean, there are areas here in Texas where we are still living, especially where Black and brown people in particular are living like their ancestors did 150 years ago. We have sundown towns.
Yeah. Okay, thank you for that. So our next panelist is Kevin, Never Stop Media. So Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about where you're from?
Sure. So my name's Kevin, Never Stop Media. I'm from Kenosha, Wisconsin. So Kenosha was pretty unknown until Jacob Blake was shot 7 times in the back by Rustin Shesky. So my platform, very pro civil rights, civil liberties. I'm an investigative journalist, so I heavily investigate police departments, and then just any system, like schools, things like that, to basically expose corruption and systemic racism. We've highlighted basically throughout these last 5 months in Kenosha, those first 3 days of unrest that happened following Jacob's shooting. We released audio scanner recording for those first 3 days, where KPD is heavily discriminating, primarily Black protester, or anybody that appeared to be anti-police or anti-police brutality, while allowing their white counterparts, in the very cliche, driving a pickup truck, flying certain flags, to just roam freely throughout town. And then on day 3, obviously, we had the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting. I was on that street. I wasn't far away from Kyle when that happened. And then kind of traveling throughout the cities here in Wisconsin, Milwaukee, Wauwatosa, and kind of highlighting the discrimination that's been happening throughout those law enforcement agencies and departments, as well as just the amount of hate and racism that is just rampant in all of these towns here in Wisconsin. A big group that I've been filming for the last couple months, People's Revolution, based out of Milwaukee. They kind of go through all of Milwaukee County and some other neighboring cities too. But they've had a big fight with Wauwatosa Police Department, with Joseph Mensa, who's responsible for shooting and killing Jay Anderson Jr., Antonio Gonzalez, and Alvin Cole in a 5-year period. And this morning, we just released breaking news that Joseph Mensa was now rehired or hired into Waukesha County Sheriff's Department. So TPR is completely losing their minds right now, and Waukesha is definitely about to get shut down. So yeah, that's pretty much what I do. My platform is not for everybody. So the same as we're seeing on the streets when it comes to protests and civil unrest and whatever, it's very real, it's very raw, and that's how I keep my platform as well. So
Okay. So, I mean, knowing that you were there in Kenosha when Rittenhouse murdered multiple people and you've been on the ground since, what do you think is the most important thing that people in Wisconsin and people in America just aren't discussing?
Well, one of the biggest things, so like for me, when I went out to live stream everything following Jacob Blake's shooting, there's a lot of rumor mill that's going around. There's a lot of misinformation. It's basically the telephone game. So it's been my mission from day one, essentially, to try to reduce the amount of misinformation that's going around. Following Kyle Rittenhouse's shooting, killing Anthony Huber, Joseph Rosenbaum, and then critically injuring Gage Grosskreutz. There's this big debate on whether it's self-defense or whether it is actually murder. So I think one of the biggest things with Kenosha is people just understanding the facts, the truth about what's actually happening, understanding the laws here in Kenosha, whether or not Kyle Rittenhouse was in a self-defense position. He illegally bought a long gun, illegally carried the long gun, and then illegally fired that long gun. And people ignore that. So if you're engaged in a criminal activity, you lose that right to self-defense or stand your ground. And it's just funny how people just absolutely ignore that. You know, will chastise a person of color if they have a firearm and get shot and killed by law enforcement, but we're praising Kyle Rittenhouse as the far right radicals superhero. And I think that's unfortunate. So I think it's just a matter of misinformation and really understanding exactly what's happening. But it's the same as with all the other cities as well. Understanding and highlighting the actual amount of racism that is here in Wisconsin. You know, I would have said prior to all this starting that yes, racism exists, but there's no way that it could be as prominent as it is. And filming this stuff and being out there every single day, I mean, it's absolutely disgusting.
Right. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we also have Emaline with Stream TV. Emaline, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you and where you're from?
Hey, so I'm Emaline Taylor. I always had seen Black Lives Matter stuff going on like in high school. So I'm younger, I'm 22. And it always, I would see it's getting worse. And I would be like, wow, like, you know, there's stuff really bad. You would see Trayvon Martin, just all these things happening. And I'm like, this is, you know, this is happening. And then George Floyd happened. And everybody in my city started going out and they started protesting. And I just got laid off for COVID, and my son, he's mixed. And I was like, you know what, I'm going to go out and I'm going to fight for my son. I didn't ever really see racism going on in Tampa, but I was like, I'm going to go out and fight. Well, as I went out, I mean, it was like eye-opening. This is happening here too. Like, I have been shot at with rubber bullets while peacefully protesting. I've had cops chase me to my car with mace for peacefully protesting. I mean, we've had people get hit by cars. We've had guns pulled on our group. We've had women assaulted. We've had women punched in the face. I mean, I've seen the cops completely ignore it. I've seen them let Proud Boys terrorize us. I've seen them arrest protesters and give them 9 felony charges for inciting riots and doing all these things while they let white supremacists bully us and injure us. I mean, they let a white supremacist group, or they just let Trumpers come out and paint a mural on the street with no permit, and nothing happened. But anytime BLM would do anything, I mean, we have full riot gear coming out. I mean, they're macing the crowd. They're doing rubber bullets. I mean, they're just tearing us to shreds. So it started out as activism, but then switched to, I need to document this. And when I go out, I need to be recording, and I need to show people that this is happening. Yeah. And then I even got a chance to go up to Gainesville, Texas, and I met Jessica, and that even opened my eyes even more to like, yeah, we have it bad in Tampa, but it's even worse other places. You know, like there are people out here in full, like we don't have a lot of people come out in full militia gear. I'm not sure if it's just our laws here, but going out there, I was like, wow. And it's like, it gets worse, you know? So we went out and documented what was happening there with people with guns. And it's just like, I mean, this experience has been insane. Just seeing, it's just like in the past, whenever it started, however long it's been, like 8 months, I've just been like, wow, like total eye-opening, changed my viewpoint on everything. And now it's like, I just want to keep fighting and keep documenting and keep showing people that it's still here. It's not going anywhere until we all decide that this is enough and we're not going to allow it to happen anymore.
Okay. So in Tampa, I mean, I know you guys have faced a lot of opposition from Trumpers, but you've also had the unique experience of having the governor of Florida speak out against your own community and your community members. What is the number one thing that you think that both the governor and the Trumpers who've harassed you, what's the number one thing that they have wrong?
That we're not a violent group. They want to paint us as like what they say, burn, loot, murder, and that's not what's happening. You know, I've been to I've been to so many protests, and it's never been violent. It's, you know, and people are there to fight for what's right. People aren't there to destruct, but they know the truth, and they know, because, you know, he sees it, and DeSantis can see that we're not burning down Florida. Florida's fine. Nothing's burned down. Things aren't getting looted. There's 93% of protests are peaceful. It's an agenda, and he's fueling Trump's, you know, agenda that Black Lives Matter is the Marxists, and they just want to destroy everything. So, and it goes down, and then it affects even more because it goes down to other mayors. And so, like, our St. Pete mayor actually asked people to help keep protesters in line. And then the following week, we had a female who was assaulted. She was punched and knocked out, and they had a Proud Boy pull a gun on our group. So the actions of DeSantis and the actions of Trump and the actions of the mayor has directly impacted. It's caused more violence. It's fueled the violence. It's made people come out stronger, and it's putting everybody in a terrible situation, and they have it so wrong.
Right. Okay. So we also have two 502 live streamers here today. Let's start with Summer. So Summer, if you could introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit more about your area.
So hey everybody, my name is Summer Dickerson. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. I am a part of 502 live streamers. We are a live streaming group here in Louisville, put together by Tara Bassett, and there's about 8 of us. So my live stream started, I've been actually live streaming a little bit because in Louisville, we've had a lot of issues. This is not our first protest. This is not our, you know, Breonna Taylor was not the first person, unfortunately, that was killed by the police. I was actually her neighbor. So I was there the night that everything happened, which I live streamed, which we now cannot find the video anywhere. No one's been able to find it. It was taken down the next day. But so I just, you know, I fight anti-human trafficking here in our city. And so I see the injustice, especially with Black and brown, you know, children coming up missing and no one caring. And we've had multiple people here shot and killed by the police. We have a huge, you know, I mean, civic racism is very real here. And so in the process of it, so when we started protesting, we're doing a lot of things behind the scenes, and then we took the actions to the street. And I want to say it was, I don't know, about 230 some odd days ago. And in that process, we have seen peaceful protesters come together, you know, and really, really make some beautiful noise and say, hey, we're not okay with this. But in the same sense, the police department here, we have went through multiple chiefs. We have just now got Atlanta's new chief, our old chief. So we just got her appointed here. We've seen plenty of protesters have both bones broken, being arrested very violently. We've been tear gassed. We've been shot with pepper balls. You name it, we've had it happen. You know, we've had the National Guards here, which then also that's how David McAtee was killed. We've had a couple activists killed, you know, in the middle of all of this. And so I really just wanted to start showing like what was going on, because there were so many different experiences. You know, I have a couple fellow live streamers, you know, 2 of them got arrested. One of the women was Black, one of the men was white, arrested at the same time, doing the same thing, just live streaming. You know, by the time they got out of jail, she had a felony, he didn't. You know, we've had live streamers arrested. We've had people, eye sockets broken, wrists broken. I mean, it's just really, really, you know, but the beauty of everything is we have came together in a force, you know, and said, we're not doing this no more. We're going to stand up, and something has to change. And for as long as we've been protesting, you know, I mean, yeah, we had a couple rough nights, but I'd have to say 97% of the time, it's been very peaceful. You know, I mean, we've taken it to the streets, and they've came out in full blown riot gear. They've came out with, you know, I mean, like I said, again, the National Guards is here. You know, we've had militia groups come, and literally we thought we were going to die that day, you know. So it's Louisville's protests, you know, as our protests, like three-way, that's what we call it. You know, we marched for Breonna Taylor. We marched for David McAtee. We marched. What is going on? No, please no calls right now. And we're going to continue to do it because we still have a lot of work done here. You know, we've got Breonna's law to try to stop the no-knock warrants. We're trying to get that everywhere. So there's a lot of things that's going on, but I think it's very important to show that, you know, we have a serious problem here and we have to get it fixed because we've buried way too many people in our city that have been shot and killed by the police, you know. And so finally, you know, and then live streaming too has been able to show a lot of people that may not have been able to understand and participate in the protest and been able to get a different point of view. Like, okay, this is what's going on. Can y'all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, you know, so just taking a stand against the injustice and saying that we're not dealing with this, you know. So it's been a very crazy thing. And unfortunately, and like I said, here in Louisville, I mean, we're in Kentucky, right? So obviously there's a lot of racism. We have the Trump supporters, we have the militia groups, we have all of these things that make it being a little bit different. And we've had some really crazy days that we were peacefully protesting, and that's what we wanted to do. And, you know, like I said, the Angry Vikings and all them came, and that was a really bad day. You know, the police did not help us. They were sitting literally a block away in their lawn chairs. And here all these people come with these long guns, and there's maybe 50 people out there, you know, on our side, you know. So one thing about our live streams we've been able to do is we've been able to turn some of the narrated stories around. The news will put something out there like, oh, you know, this happened and this, you know, these protesters did that. And we had it on camera like, no, actually, that's not what happened. And so we've had to have them retract some of their stories, and we're going to continue to fight. Our fight is not over here. It has just begun, and we understand that we have a lot of work to do on every level. Obviously, hitting the streets, getting legislation changed. We have, you know, some mayor's seats going to come up, and we've got a lot of stuff going on. So, and we're going to continue.
Everything I said, but on my end,
Is mine still recording?
As the person pushing this out, it did not capture it.
Okay.
So that's what the issue was there.
Okay. Well,
so just real quick, just for them real quick, I'll just say we'll be, you know, uploading, I believe, this after the fact, right, at some point.
Yes.
So it will be available there. But it was just a brief introduction of who I am. A lot of you have probably already heard that before. For those of you who haven't, go back to the VOD. We'll be sharing that out. You'll be able to catch that, but we've got this the rest of the way. All right, so I'll go ahead and let you go ahead and re-ask your question because I've already forgot what you asked.
Oh, so Louisville, the main force behind Louisville has been, there has been a large group of people on the ground seeking justice for Breonna Taylor. They've been out there every single day for 200 something days now. What is the most important thing that you could tell us about the community there, the activists that come out daily to fight for justice?
Well, to me, it's really the fact that it is a community. It's not just a bunch of people coming out, you know, spending some time to yell, to hold up signs, to do whatever, to drive the point. It is a community. It is a family. You know, is everybody there 100% of the time? No. And do we have people who are, you know, there 100% of the time? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, we are all part of this community. We are all part of this family. We take care of each other. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I have behind the scenes, because keep in mind, a lot of stuff isn't public. You don't, you know, some things are, but a lot of it is not public. I cannot tell you how many times, both publicly and behind the scenes, that there have been calls put out to help people, you know, whether it be because, you know, they had a house fire and literally needed a home replaced. or if it's simply just, needing somebody to help take care of them, because maybe they're sick, whether it be COVID or something else, or, given the times that we're in right now, people need help financially, or just getting food, or, all of these things. This community that has built up around the protests since last spring is just really come together, and it's been beautiful to watch. Like, frankly, for somebody like me who is a consistent pessimist, it's been really eye-opening again for me to actually really finally see in front of me a community like build and come together and take care of itself.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mathew. Okay, and last but not least, we have Meg with the Black Zebra Impact Team. Hi, Meg. Can you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit more about Black Zebra?
Sure, absolutely. So my name is Meg White, and I'm here in Sacramento, California. Black Zebra is this amazing artist storytelling machine that works, first of all, as their charity. They're a 501c3 nonprofit, and what they do is bring together community members, organizations, as well as local artists to really amplify the voices and the experiences within our communities and all over the world. I first started collaborating with Black Zebra through my organization, JUICE, which is Justice Unites Individuals and Communities Everywhere, which is just a grassroots information sharing and community building group. And so what we've been really doing is going out and working to keep the community as safe as we can during these times, along with the Black Zebra Impact Team. And a lot of times the role that I've had is kind of just watching what's going on all around to be able to help plan for community safety when we're constantly being attacked by law enforcement, and now here in Sacramento, obviously, white supremacists.
Okay. So yeah, in Sacramento, I mean, we've seen a large presence of Boogaloo Boys and Proud Boys. So, seeing that and, being on the ground against these people, why do you think that DC was so unprepared on January 6th?
I think that there are two potential answers to that question. I think one is a lot more likely. The first one is they were completely prepared. And, it was a situation where everybody was very complicit in what was going on. I know what we saw and what I assume that we saw nationwide was really law enforcement working with the white supremacist protesters all the way up to what happened on the J6 with the insurrection. And I know here in Sacramento, we saw Trump supporters, QAnon, 3%ers, and all sorts of other obvious white supremacist groups be allowed to do mass inductions into their organizations, literally with police presence and police protection at our Capitol. So I think for a lot of us, it wasn't extremely surprising to see what happened. I think that we even, saw their security guards and law enforcement moving gates and waving people on in. The other option, which I think is far more likely, is they just didn't take it serious enough. And I have seen firsthand the level of surveillance that law enforcement gives to anti-racist protesters. So I know that they know exactly what we're doing before we do it all of the time. So we can only assume that they would have, if they were doing their due diligence with the other side protesting, known what was happening there as well.
Right. Okay. So I guess this question is for everybody, and this is an opinion question. In your opinion, in each one of your local areas, is law enforcement complicit with white supremacists? Jessica.
I'm sorry. It's not funny. It's not. I don't mean to make light of it. You know what I mean? I just, I guess, Julie, right? Is that right? With Black Zebra? Did I get that right? Meg, sorry, your organization is called Juice. I'm sorry.
Close.
And I interchange stuff all the time. I'm terribly sorry. So I think, Meg hit it on the head, right? I mean, we've been watching in all of our cities. We know that it's not unique. We know that law enforcement works with white supremacists. Our national intelligence for the last decade has been publishing reports about the infiltration of white supremacists in our local and national policing institutions. It's not a secret. No one's surprised. We've literally pulled open records and found where the police issued permits to white supremacists to come, and they said they were coming to make a show of force. We have evidence of police working with white supremacists across the nation, and I think any legitimate activist who's even remotely involved in their local movement has seen that play out. And I think, Meg, your breakdown of the two options on January 6th is really on point and astute. And personally, I think that it's a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, right? I think at the top, when you start, leadership failures are always where it starts. And I think you probably had a lot of people in upper leadership positions who just assumed that things would be handled, because why wouldn't they? I mean, every other protest that's taken place for BLM has been handled appropriately. They had a National Guardsman stationed every 6 feet on every step of the Capitol building for every BLM protest, right? Why wouldn't they assume that those underneath them would be prepared and capable of preparing for January 6th? But then on the lower levels, where we have these levels of infiltration, there, of course, wasn't that planning, but there was plenty of planning to facilitate a coup, to facilitate these types of encroachments. So I think that at this point, for anyone to argue that there is not a blatant connection and infiltration of white supremacists and far-right extremists and local policing, I think is either a fool, a liar, or, a part of it. That they're either lying to themselves because they don't want to face the truth, or they're lying because they're a part of it. So it hands down, no doubt, absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else want to add to that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to.
Oh, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I just want to say, just watching how things are handled, like crime-wise, like just watching protesters get arrested with 9 felonies just for inciting riot, and then having people hit protesters with cars and they just get to go home with their families. That's what showed me that they're working together, and we had an instance once when we were in Newport Richey, and we were at the police station, and it was just a peaceful protest, pretty much just giving out information about what's going on and what we're trying to do and stuff like that. And we had a group of 20 Proud Boys come and harass us, get in our face, like just act a total fool. And we were at the police station, and it took them 20 minutes to come outside and help us. And I mean, I went up to the fence and I could see them behind the fence, because they have this like mesh fence lining that kind of makes it so you can't see back there where the cars are at. And I could see the police officers just sitting there watching while there's these 20 big men, yelling at girls, and there's kids there and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's just so obvious. And we've documented it. Everybody's documented it. They're 100% working together. And it makes it so much harder for people to protest, because people are getting arrested and people are going to jail. It's insane to watch how much they work together and how much they target BLM and let white supremacists just run around crazy doing whatever they want.
Yeah. Summer?
Yeah, so here in Louisville, I'll just sort of show you like an example, right? So we had every militia group you could think of, 3%ers, all of that, right? So we had INFAC come down, which is a Black militia group, and they came down, and they were coming down to actually, I guess, in what I assumed was to support us, right? And so that morning, the police, they have put all these barricades up. They come outside, they stand in the street with their faces towards us, because there's nobody on the other side. And then you have so many times where, so they were like, I don't know, just being really extra when this Black militia group comes down that's there to support us. But then you have many a times where we have caught white supremacist groups in garages, The day that the Angry Vikings came, they were actually at a place down here called Cox Park. We had went there that morning because, of course, we're live streamers, right? So we wanted to see what was going on. As I'm walking out, there's an officer sitting here shaking hands and taking pictures with them, right? And not 20 minutes later, they all start bombarding, 6th and Jefferson. And again, like I said, there was officers not even a half a block away, didn't do anything. And I mean, that has happened so many times here. They'll bring out all of these, people on the roof and, snipers, just everywhere for us. And like on Halloween, we did a thing where we were trying to do like a movie night and stuff like that. Somebody shot into the square, and of course the guys were just walked off. You know what I mean? So many, many times, whether they think we know it or not, we know that they have worked with them and they have let them go. And then they'll say, oh, well, we did this because, we got intel that they were going to shoot you guys on the roof or whatever. We're like, yeah, because we're the ones that gave you the intel. Like, you know what I mean? So it's very, very disturbing how different it is when you have, all of us get out there. And I mean, the biggest thing, and again, I'm not going to say we haven't had a couple rough nights, but the biggest thing Louisville did is we blocked some traffic for a little bit, right? And so, and then the riot gear and the aggression and the ridiculousness of the two. But yet, when these, the Angry Vikings came, when they finally did show up, it was because it wasn't really because they didn't stop them. Those people were like, oh, okay, like we're gonna leave because this isn't like I don't know what they were thinking, but they finally left. After they terrorized us, after they had long guns, after I'm pretty sure everybody that was there thought we were gonna die that day, and they didn't show up. And mind you, just like Black Zebra said, or one of them said, we're right there by the police department. We're right there by the mayor's office. We're right in the central of everything it is. But you can't come out. Where were you? You know what I mean? Like, where were you on so many times? But it doesn't matter if it's a crowd full of people or if it's just 20 people marching. There's always a big presence. They block us. They block us in to where we're all trapped in, and it's just crazy stuff. So there's definitely a very clear version of how they treat us and how they let these militia groups come in. And like I said, we've seen them walk them out of garages. We've seen them taking pictures and, shaking their hands, and we don't get that. You know what I mean? We get tear gassed. We get thrown around and beat up and ridiculous amount of charges being thrown on people. I can't even tell you. I mean, one day we had 86 people arrested. You know what I mean? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and not even just protesters. We've had, city leaders and people that, sit down in Frankfurt and stuff also arrested for just walking, you know what I mean? Like on the sidewalk. So it's very clear on how they treat us differently. We should be allowed to peaceful protest. And I'll say this again, what happened in DC is absolutely ridiculous. They knew that was going to happen. I don't care what they try to dice it up as. When BML and everybody went out to DC and they did their marches and everything, they were met with a crap load of people there, right? And like, we all knew this because we all knew 6 was going to happen. So for them to say, oh, we didn't know, how did you not know? When we all knew it was going to happen. So that, that them trying to say, oh, well, we didn't know. They built a whole hanging thing to hang people. You know what I mean? And the fact that this is not, and then I'm seeing some places where they're not, some people may not get charged and all that. If that was us, it would have been a bloodbath. There wouldn't have been no arrest. There would have been, the breaking news would have been tons of people were, killed because they took over the Capitol Hill. And it's just, it just really shows you if you didn't know what white privilege is, everybody figured it out that day, And so that's something that we have to start realizing and understanding.
Right. And I think, going along with that, looking at all of the lies that mainstream media has told the general population, if you are, Aunt Maureen or Uncle Bob or whoever sitting at home watching Fox News or whatever you're watching, and they're talking about there's rioting and looting and burning, when there actually is not, they're going to be unaware of these things that take place. And so this is a question for for everybody. What do you think, you know, can be done or should be done to help bring more awareness to the general population about, you know, the civil rights abuse and the police brutality that's taking place in America on a regular basis? Anybody? Kevin? How are you?
Yeah, can I touch on the last question before I answer this? I wanted to respond because there's stuff seriously important when it comes to Wisconsin. So, the night of the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting, prior to me arriving downtown, I live streamed the Kenosha scanner where multiple units had surrounded 125 to 150 armed militia and magically lost them as if they were aliens, only to see them then later gathered up in that ultimate gas station. There's video that has circled around the country, all over social media, mainstream media, where you have law enforcement departments that were out there that have thanked the militia for their service that night. One of the biggest things where we released a 6-hour and 44-minute recording of the KPD scanner. And once the shooting started, so I broke down the scanner minute by minute. And prior to the shooting, it highlights all types of discrimination with protesters being arrested, militia just freely walking around. But during that scanner, and and we released it, it's on our page, but at the 5-hour and 40-minute mark, in that recording, law enforcement's aware of the shooting within 3 minutes, which I don't know how it took them 3 minutes. They were sitting right there. But within 10 minutes, they knew there was a video of the shooting. 5 minutes later, they knew who the shooter was, not by name, but by description. And all over that police scanner, Rittenhouse is the only one that is identified as a male white wearing a green shirt and a long gun. Throughout that entire scanner, they are basically following his tracks, because we see him in the famous videos where he just walks completely past law enforcement. And the one thing that just goes so unnoticed, where the entire country was told that he was picked up in Illinois, late that following morning, on the KPD scanner, they apprehend a male white long green green shirt long gun. They apprehended him that day. There's witnesses that have come forward stating that same thing, that they've seen Kyle Rittenhouse get into a marked squad. And then even with Joshua Zeminski. So that's the person that fired the very first shot, which led to the next 10 minutes of chaos that happened that night. Myself doing an investigation, and then a bunch of just, citizen skateboarder kids throughout Kenosha, doing their due diligence, because, their friends were murdered on that street. KPD was made aware that Joshua Zeminski fired that first shot, and KPD did nothing. Once we released our kind of video article about it, that got sent to KPD, which then also got sent to the ATF. Joshua Zeminski was arrested on 4 different charges. 3 of them dropped, and now he's only sitting with a disorderly conduct with use of firearm. And from what it sounds like, he's, going to be a confidential informant now. So, it's not just the police departments that are working with these militia groups. It's also the district attorney's offices. It's, city and state politicians. There's a lot of stuff. We highlighted that on day 1, the initial fires that were started by a Wisconsin National Guard member while he was not on active duty. He was out there on day 2 when the entire city went up in flames. He didn't get called to active duty until day 3. We released that as well. That again went to Kenosha Police Department. They've done nothing. ATF says that they're still investigating. So, you know, and we've seen this in Wauwatosa when it comes to Wauwatosa police working with militia groups against, you know, TPR. So yeah, I mean, it's big. And then obviously we've seen the hundreds of videos and, you know, what the other streamers are saying in you know, in their cities. But I think as far as the new question that you posed, as far as kind of bringing light to these issues, you know, I think it's a matter of, like, for me, I'll kind of say how it happened for me. So, you know, for me, I'm a white person, I'm a white male, so it doesn't affect me, right? So I can very easily just kind of turn my head and I'm not affected by these things. You hear black male with a gun, you know, shot by law enforcement, and you're like, okay, well, that's a criminal. And you know, you ignore it and you just move on about your day. But when you start seeing stuff that starts to become very questionable, so like for me, filming protesters actually having their civil rights being violated, where they're literally, you know, sitting in a circle in the middle of a street that's barricaded. So there's no, you're blocking roadways. Nobody can come down the street anyway. Sitting peacefully in a circle, participating in, you know, legitimate civil disobedience. That's a constitutional protected activity. And then having 10 squad cars roll up and arresting these people, you know, for me, that bothered me. So it's like you have to find a point where something doesn't sit well with you and you need to start questioning. So for me, seeing stuff like that, I started to go back and kind of look into stuff a lot more. You know, the names that everybody keeps saying and the signage that's, you know, being held. Like I've spent thousands of hours researching who these people are. And for me, I make it a point where if I'm lucky enough to be able to have family members of these individuals, you know, I want to be able to film so that their voice is actually heard as you know, a mother or a father or a sibling. You know, like you mentioned Oscar Grant earlier, you know, I think a bunch of us saw that movie that came out about him. And, you know, again, it's a situation where like, okay, well, that's a really heavy movie. But then I can shut the movie off and go on about my day. I was fortunate enough at an event out here where his family members were out in Wisconsin and speaking. And that makes it way more powerful. You know, Joel Acevedo, you know, you just hear the blind story about Joel where, you know, he's in a chokehold with Milwaukee police officers, and you start doing the research. Joel Acevedo has no criminal record. He wants to be a cop, and he's hanging around with cops thinking that if he does that, he can, you know, kind of have an in to get on a department. Goes to a party at a Milwaukee PD's house, and he doesn't come out alive that day. So you know, it's really a matter of understanding and recognizing that there is a problem, and not, you know, dismissing it. So I think that's, you know, the first step.
Okay. All right, thank you. Jessica has a question. You could.
Yeah, I do. Some of the folks watching on my TikTok stream here have been asking some questions. I told them I would try to present the ones that I can. That said, I just want to add something, if I could, to what Kevin just said, because I think it's really careful when we put. I want to be really careful. I think we take a great responsibility when we do things like this and we broadcast it out to the World Wide Web, and we're trying to set an example, right? And so I appreciate what you were saying, Kevin, you know, just kind of bringing in your own perspective of maybe coming to terms with your own privileges and how you've kind of learned to exploit that and how you've come to where you are. And I think that's really important. But I just want to hit on something you said. You know, you were mentioning how you kind of looked back into these figures, these names of these victims of police brutality, in particular, these names of Black people who, of course, we know see the predominant edge of violence on this in this world of and realm of police brutality that we're talking about. But I just want to be really careful because I think that like sometimes we kind of start to use the narrative of the oppressor without realizing it. So when we talk about, you know, you looked into them and you're like, oh, they didn't even have a criminal record, or I just think it's really important that we point out that it doesn't matter, right? I mean, it doesn't matter what your criminal record is. It doesn't matter if George Floyd had mugged someone earlier in the day. It doesn't matter if, you know, it really doesn't matter. And I know you're not saying that. I know that wasn't what you were implying in any capacity whatsoever. I'm fully aware of that. But I just want to add this caveat because we do have so many people listening to us. So I just want to clarify that it's important that we all remember that what we're working towards is denormalizing the idea that police can murder out of fear. Just because they're afraid, just because someone's a criminal, all of these things doesn't matter. We should be working towards denormalizing the idea that police have the right to kill with immunity just because they were in fear, or just because someone didn't follow orders, or just because, you know, we want to work towards a world where we normalize a society that doesn't need a predominantly white force of men with weapons to keep us safe, right? Because that all stems out of slave culture and slave economy. So again, I totally know that's not what you were insinuating. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but whenever I hear us kind of using that language, I think it's important to talk about the history of it and where it comes from and kind of how that narrative of plays into our own language. So I just want to touch on that real quick, and I'm sure you'll want to follow up on that, which is totally fair. Yeah. And so I'll let you do that before I ask my question then.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say it's, you know, it's kind of that whole myth that goes back, you know, decades of Black criminality, right? So it's like what we saw just in the decision with Jacob Blake, this ridiculous 2-hour long press conference where Noble Ray and you know, DA Gravely they highlighted Jacob Blake's criminal past, where it's, you know, to basically justify, well, he's done this multiple times and this is why we shot him 7 times. You know what I mean? So like the mentioning with Joel Acevedo of, because it seems like on the right, or conservatives or Trumpers or, you know, just whoever, they're like, that's their justification is, oh, he's a criminal, so they deserved it, right? So, and that's why I mentioned that specifically with Joel, where it's like, this is a person that had no criminal background. Sure. You know what I mean? So it's like, you can't justify this. There's no, and you shouldn't be able to anyway, just because you screwed up in the past, like you're saying. You know what I mean? That doesn't justify getting shot today. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so. Totally. So the question that somebody asked, and maybe this is a good question for you, Meg, because I know you're working with an organization that's branching a lot of groups together. People are asking me about, you know, there's these rumors that have been passed around online in activist communities about activists going missing. And I've certainly seen some reports and claims of that, but I don't personally know of any activists who've gone missing. I obviously know of several activists who've been arrested without due cause. But are you aware of any cases of that, or is anyone aware of any cases of anything like that involving activists who've gone missing?
Me personally, I'm not aware of any activists that have gone missing that we haven't been able to locate. But I think kind of also going back to the question that was asked a bit earlier, We regularly see activists kidnapped by law enforcement and just disappear for a while, get lost in the system, get intentionally arrested during a holiday, so that way they're going to be stuck longer, they get their possessions taken away. And I think a lot of times what this goes to show is, like we've been talking about, the stark difference between how the government as well as the law enforcement branch treats anti-racist protesters versus white supremacists. I know what I've witnessed is just white supremacy as well as white saviorism really running rampant throughout law enforcement, but also throughout this movement, as well. And as we're trying to really get away from and fight against systematic injustice, I think it's important that as part of security culture, like I'm sure the people are asking online, we keep track of each other and be sure that somebody within your affinity group has your personal information and can be sure that we're checking in with each other because we do oftentimes see people just go missing, and then it's a lot of resources as well as a lot of stress on the community trying to find them when they've been taken at the hands of law enforcement.
Let me say, I haven't seen people go missing, but I have seen people targeted like crazy, like there's been white supremacists, or I feel I've come outside my house and seen people waiting in their cars outside my house. We have some white supremacists that go to people's houses, go to people's parents' houses and take videos outside of their houses. So I don't personally know people who've gone missing, but I've seen people be put in danger and be put in situations that they shouldn't be put in because they're fighting. And sometimes it gets a little scary, it gets scary when there's men waiting outside your house, or people taking videos at your house when you're not home. So it's definitely a lot of our people feel like they have to look over their shoulder because people will be at their house. It's just, it's wild.
And I'd like to also touch on that. Here in Louisville, we have had, a lot of people targeted. We have had live streamers where literally there were nights that especially live streamers have been targeted. Leaders have been targeted. We have had nails in people's driveways. We have had, racist words written on people's stuff. We have had catalytic converters come up missing on people's cars. We have definitely, and then obviously, we know about Ferguson where people have been killed and things like that. But in this movement, I have seen a lot of people targeted. And I think if it wasn't for our own kind of security culture, checking in with each other, making sure that we're okay, making sure that we get home, understanding that, hey, there's, making it very aware. Someone is following me. I have had people follow me. I've had people sit outside my house. I have literally had to move my children out of my home, especially in the very beginning, and have them somewhere safe because I did not know if someone's going to come in my home. So yes, that is very much so happening. We had here one particular night where literally they were, and that was I'm almost positive it was a night that 2 of our live streamers got arrested and targeted. And then later on that night, there was another young lady that does Milky Mess streaming down here in Louisville, and she was targeted. There were lasers on her shirt, we seen it. And then they finally got her and they went through a whole crowd of people and they tackled and threw her down to the ground. You know what I mean? So that has definitely happened. And I think that if we weren't, I think every movement, we all have our things, right? We all go through our growing spurts and all that. But I think if it is not for the protesters and the activists here in Louisville really checking in and making sure that people are okay and saying, hey, I need you to always let somebody know where you're at. Even now, right now, we're still doing things, but we're not, it is kind of, we're taking a little self-care, but doing some planning and organizing as well. And even still, every single day we check in, we make sure everybody's okay. We make sure they're safe because, even just the other day, I took food down to what we call Breeway, and there was, of course, the big old trucks with the flags just driving around, you know what I mean? And all summer long, they took pictures of us. They doxed us. People lost their jobs. People lost their homes. People have a lot of stuff going on right now, and all because of why? Because we stood up and said, hey, the police brutality of Black and brown people is not okay. The systemic racism that is going on is not okay. And it's going to, it's got to stop. Breonna Taylor was an amazing, amazing young lady. And I do want to touch on something real quick because I see this happening a lot, especially to people that have been killed. We've seen it here locally with Breonna Taylor. We've seen it here locally, you know, with David McAtee and then nationally with other people. I am so tired of people bringing any kind of past up. Like, whatever you think you know, I don't care. No one, what is the point of having, right? So we want to say we have this justice system that they say works. What is the point of having 12 people in a jury box to tell you whatever if you're not even making it there and 6 people are carrying you to the grave? What is the point of that? And then what they do to justify their shooting is say, oh, well, they were involved with this person or they were doing this. Who cares? Who cares? No one deserves to be killed by someone that, you know, has a badge or whatever and is in a position of power. That's not what the police department is supposed to be for. So that narrative just really drives me nuts. I mean, because we're still sitting here like, no, Breonna Taylor was in her home. You know what I mean? Like, she wasn't, you know, she didn't deserve that. Nobody deserves that, you know? So I definitely think that that was a very good thing to say, because that is the first thing they do when something happens. They dig up somebody's stuff and say, oh, well, you're not going to justify it. We've all seen it. Some of us have been seeing it for a long time. Some people have been living it for a long time. And I think it's, you know, 2020, if nothing else, gave a clear vision on where we are at in this country and what needs to be changed. And people that get up and stand against the system is what's going to change it. And that's the only way it's going to get changed.
One thing I did want to
sorry, real quick,
mention-
just a quick reminder, let's all make sure we mute when somebody else is speaking. We're getting some echo going through. So yeah.
Okay.
One thing I did want to be sure to mention when we're talking about activists disappearing and dying is that 19-year-old in Tallahassee. I think it was Oluwatan. I'm sure I'm butchering her name, but she was a really powerful activist in the Protect Black Lives movement, and she was murdered by her attacker, who they found. But I think that this is something that we kind of see when we talk about how law enforcement is constantly making us less safe as a way to, one, scare us into doing what we want to do, but also as a way to be able to wash their hands when something happened to us. So I think that we really need to keep a close eye anytime activists just randomly disappear and it doesn't look like it may have been connected to the larger scheme of things, because we've seen time and time again that the government seems to have a way to put our most powerful activists in some very dangerous situations and then blame the community for their death.
Yeah. And I guess kind of sticking with that subject, not as activists who have disappeared, but activists who have been murdered, and maybe the murders are unsolved, and especially in Louisville. And I guess I'll ask you, Mathew, because Louisville has taken some really, really close losses, Travis Nagby and Chris Smith. How has that changed the activist community? How has that changed your community, just in your day-to-day and the things that you guys are working for?
Well, it hasn't necessarily changed what we're working for, right, in the community locally. But it was a gut punch.
Yeah.
Sorry, hold on a second. There we go. Sorry, I had to make sure to unmute from my end. Sorry, I got to remember to do that. It didn't change much with the there we go. Okay, it didn't change much with the community. What it did. It didn't change. Sorry, I'm just getting my thoughts back in order here. It didn't change much in regards to what we're fighting, what everybody is fighting for, what everybody is working towards. However, it was a gut punch to the community. When we lost Travis, like Travis Najee was literally the voice. You may have heard him referred to as like Chance, the rapper. Because he was our guy who like came up with a lot of our chants, and frankly, some of those chants like the mama, and so on, like you hear those in other cities across the country as well. So, you know, even in the short time that we had with him involved with the movement, he had really a major impact for Louisville and the country, frankly. So losing him was really hard.
Yeah.
And then, you know, just within a few weeks to lose Chris Smith, who is another, you know, powerful voice in his own way in the community, somebody who had been involved with the community for a very long time, somebody who helped me personally integrate better with the community, you know, early on when I was, you know, trying to find my way. I think from my perspective, I'm definitely not speaking for everybody.
Yeah.
But from my perspective, it caused everybody to take a step back. And for a lot of people, you know, we've lost others, right? Like we had David McAtee, who was murdered by National Guard early on.
Mm-hmm.
We had Tyler Girth, who was murdered by some, you know, by an essentially random person,
Yeah.
you know, with at the square. But these, I think, were really a wake-up call to everybody that this is real, right? Like this isn't just us getting out there, throwing up a few chants, throwing up a few signs, you know, doing our thing, or, you know, maybe maybe people finding other ways to cause a little extra trouble, you know, to get a point across. I think it made a lot of people realize that everybody who is involved is at some level of risk, because when you are standing, what we have seen throughout history, regardless of whose history it is, who's telling the history, one thing that is always consistent throughout history is those who stand up to fight for something as important as human rights, that there is always a force that stands against them in some way. And it's always been different throughout history, right? Right now, that manifests mostly in social media, you know, and doxing attacks. But it also gets more extreme, where you have people being stalked. You have, you know, people showing up either, you know, at places of demonstrations or at people's homes to come after them. Yeah. That includes media people as well. You know, I've had some death threats, but I've not had as much as some of the others around me have had to deal with.
Yeah.
But oh, go ahead. I think I heard somebody maybe wanting to.
No, go ahead and finish.
I was just gonna, you know, but at the end of the day, like, I think it really made everybody realize that this is real, and, you know, we needed to take a step back and regroup.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what is going on right now. You know, there's I get questions. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about this now, because, you know, there's people that ask questions about what is going on. So just real briefly, I'm going to mention that, you know, Louisville is not done. Louisville is going to be back out in the streets. You know, you could rest assured that there are people working behind the scenes to, you know, figure out all the things that are going to happen next in the coming months, especially as we get, you know, as we approach a lot of the anniversaries and milestones that we have coming up this year. So yeah, it is, you know, Louisville will be back out there, but again, with what happened, especially in the latter half of the year, it really just forced everybody to take a step back, look within, take care of themselves, more importantly, because the PTSD from all of this, from 2020 entirely, but especially at the end, the PTSD is real for a lot of people, and we've all had to deal with it in our own ways. So yeah, I would say that's how it's impacted us.
Okay. And I know Summer has a question, but I just want to say, going back to Travis Nagady, the thing that really impacted me personally the most is when he was killed, seeing the activist movements all around the country mourn his death, seeing, having vigils in Kansas City. They had vigils in Portland. A lot of activists all around the country hurt. They hurt with Louisville over Travis's death. So yeah, that was just my 2 cents on that. And so I got Summer's got her hand raised.
So I just kind of want to touch on a little bit what Mathew was talking about, which you did an awesome job. Louisville is very different, because we have had, the whole movement started because Breonna Taylor here got killed. Then we had David McAtee get killed. Then we had another activist that a lot of people don't really, because it was in the middle of all the stuff right before Tyler Girth got killed, a lady named Kim. She was a huge gun activist and was also involved in the Breonna Taylor. Her was a carjacking. And then we had Tyler get killed, unfortunately, which a lot of people, he's an amazing guy. We all loved him. Then we had Travis, which that was a blow for us, because Travis, everybody loved Travis. Then we had Chris, and then, we've had, like I said, we've had a lot of strange things happen. But one thing that I will say is that it did change us. It changed us in a major way. It changed us on how we looked at things. It changed on our checking in with each other. It changed how real this was. Like, when you're an activist and you go to protest, there's a chance that something can happen. I mean, my life has been completely turned upside down, because of people that don't like what I do, and so I think with all the unfortunateness that Louisville has had, whether they are protesters or, people say, well, we caught them, like Travis, they caught his murder through some DNA stuff and like that. And so and Tyler, they have his to answer, because I'd seen a question come through on some updates on that. Tyler's killer has also been locked up. They have not caught Chris's killer. They have not caught, we know who David McAtee's killers and Breonna Taylor's killers are. And as far as that goes, all we've had is a couple cops fired. One cop got charged with one in endangerment. And another thing that, and this is just my opinion, that has been very difficult for here in Louisville is our Attorney General, Dana Cameron, did not try that case the way that he needed to, Breonna's case. You know what I mean? And so, the grand jury has came up. The grand jury is now impeaching him, taking steps to impeach him. We have tried to get a new prosecutor for the case, and so Louisville, it changed us and it is hurting. It did hurt us, but it knocked the wind out of us for a second, but don't get it twisted. We are still planning and we are still doing things, and we are going to come back stronger than ever. And we just realized that, hey, we are a family. We've been out here for a long time, and we've got to start checking in and checking up with each other and making sure people get home and safe, and taking, Mathew had mentioned there's, some situations where people are being stalked and all this other stuff. We have to take that stuff serious. And this goes for everybody anywhere where you're at. You have to understand that once you step that line over and you say, okay, I'm going to go against the oppressor, that there are some things that may come with that. You know what I mean? Like so understand what you're getting yourself into. Listen. I think some people need to, we got to learn how to listen a lot and follow direct, just follow your people, follow your leaders, you know what I mean? And so, I know that, yes, it was kind of been a little quiet for a second, but there's people still occupying Breeway. There are still organizers that are planning for all the next things. We just had an action not too long ago, I think last week, over some eviction stuff, because we also understand here in Louisville, we're not just fighting against police brutality and systemic racism. We are also fighting against just the whole core of the system, you know, because so many people, while we have all this going on, we have people being evicted and their stuff's being set on the streets and all of this craziness is going on, you know. So yeah, Louisville's took some hits, but we are stronger and we're gonna come out of this stronger than ever. And when we hit the streets, when we do, trust me, you guys will all be very aware of it. Because this is where Breonna Taylor, you know, and we're going to fight and try to get justice for her. And we're not going to stop, you know what I mean? Like, because she deserves justice. She deserves justice. Her family deserves justice. And not only that, but getting justice for her will also open the doors for all the other victims here in Louisville, because we have had so many. We had one 17-year-old child that was shot, a cop shot through a window, and this kid got shot 17 times. You know what I mean? Like, this is happening too much here. And so it's happening too much everywhere. But everywhere, because it's ridiculous, right? So, like, you know, it's not okay. And so, yeah, the movement, you know, this was not a moment, this is a movement, and it's going to continue, and we're going to come stronger than ever, because there's a lot of people learning a lot of things, and we're gonna get through this.
Okay. So just kind of, you know, switching gears, I know that we don't have a whole lot of time left, but just switching gears for a minute. Everybody here has had one-on-one encounters with aggressors, with militia, neo-Confederates, white supremacists, alt-right, whatever they're going by. If America doesn't do something about these extremists, what is the future going to look like for our country? And more importantly, what is the future going to look like for Black, Indigenous, and people of color?
I think it's going to look the same. I mean, and that's the problem. So I don't think it's not going to get better unless we all put our foot down and we all say this has to stop. This can't be any longer. It's going to look the same that it's looked for the past 400 years or however long America's been here. It's going to look bad, and more people are going to lose their lives that don't need to lose their lives. And more people not even lose their lives. I mean, we see every day people who are put in the system and can't get out of the system because it's a trap. And I personally have seen my own brother. My brother's adopted. I've seen the system abuse him. And I've seen like just him put in situations he doesn't need to be put in just because of the color of his skin. So if we don't change this, I mean, that's not an option. That's not an option. I don't think anybody here thinks that's an option. And that's why I think stuff is going to change, because I think everybody's done. I mean, this is the age of information. If you're not on the train of getting rid of racism, then you are just a piece of crap. Let me keep my language good. You're just a piece of crap because it's obvious.
Yeah.
And it has to stop.
Right. Meg has her hand raised.
Yeah, I'm very confident that what is happening now is that the white supremacist groups have pulled back for planning. I don't think that what we saw was the last attempt at insurrection. And I think that what we've seen historically is that we really can't rely on the government or law enforcement to keep us safe. So I think the future looks like BIPOC communities and their accomplices protecting themselves and creating systems so we can have mutual aid and security, because that's really the only way that we're going to be able to progress in the future.
Okay, Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, once again, Meg really hit it on the head. I mean, Biden just put out this executive order for racial equality, right? And what a historic moment for our nation. But let's be real. Our federal government has instituted civil rights acts and ended Reconstruction. And listen, this is about, if we haven't learned anything else from this pandemic and this movement, what we have to take away is this truth. White supremacy and systemic racism functions at the local level. It will only be dismantled at the local level. You can't just march in the streets and call for Biden to take action, call for executive orders, new legislation at the congressional level. It's not going to mean shit. We have laws in every state that make it illegal to point guns at people. Local governments, local cops aren't enforcing the laws. If we want change, we have to start holding our local elected officials accountable. And it's not just about activism. in the streets, which is important at the grassroots level, but it's also about getting people in office. It's about getting, putting your money into Black communities, into resistance movements, into Indigenous communities, and into campaigns, right? One thing that bothers me a lot is I see at the local level, I see a lot of white individuals who still think that the best way to support the Black community or the BIPOC community is to get in office and do things for them. Because maybe they think they have more experience, right? And they're going to really help this community. And it becomes a selling point almost. You know what? I think white people have been doing this long enough, right? I think we've kind of shown what we're capable of. So as effective as I think I could be in public office, I'm much more interested in finding those strong voices of leadership that don't look like me, and prioritizing them. And maybe I can be of service in some way. Maybe I do have experience in some capacity they don't, or maybe I have something to offer. But instead of trying to supersede that individual, just standing with them and offering what I can. And I think that's the kind of mindset we have to start having, is understanding that equality doesn't mean everyone who is not equal has to catch up, but also understanding that sometimes you got to stop and take a step back. And we have to start creating equity and space in the room for all the voices, and just prioritizing local activism, local politics. You can't clean up the nation if you can't clean up your own backyard. So we're going to see increased violence. We're going to see increased terrorism. We're going to see this pushback more so than ever before. And history tells us so. So if we want to be prepared to deal with that and really make a change, we have to stop counting on our national government to do it for us. We have to start being willing to do it ourselves and together in our local community.
Okay, Kevin?
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on that stuff too. First off, the Travis tragedy. So like for Louisville, I want you to understand how his voice and you guys elevating his voice actually impacted Wisconsin with his loss. So, you know, on behalf of Wisconsin, thank you for elevating his voice, because it seriously made an impact while he was alive, and then with his tragic death. And I think with a lot of these far right militia groups, you know, to kind of go on some of the issues where, you know, people are getting doxxed left and right. And there needs to be stricter laws on that. You know, I've had where my LLC is registered, that's public record, anybody can find that. You know, not many people are looking for that type of stuff, but then that address gets put out there. I've moved 5 times in the last 5 months, to the point I'm technically homeless now. Death threats constantly, anywhere from, you know, the smallest thing to the biggest thing. Fighting with the city right now to try to get restraining orders on certain people. You know, and I'm obviously not the only person that has dealt with that. We've got activists here that have had to leave their house for over a month. You know, so I think it's an issue where these groups need to be held accountable, right? And that's everything from Trump down to you know, our law enforcement that we're seeing are getting arrested now and investigated. All of these individuals that were on Parler that, you know, claim their speech is free speech and they can say whatever they want. You know, there needs to be accountability, and people need to be arrested. If there's an actual threat that comes through, you know, whether it's I'm going to beat your ass or I'm going to blow your guts out, they need to be arrested. And if law enforcement can actually make those arrests and start holding those people accountable, ideally it will create a domino effect and then ultimately help, you know, kind of stop that. And like Jessica was saying, as far as like, you can't just hold whatever president, you know, is in office at that time, you have to get out and you have to start voting. You have to start going to your city council meetings. You know, like in Kenosha, we're trying to block a grant right now, a $49,000 grant for automatic license plate readers. The majority of my city had no idea that this was even on the city council's, you know, dinner plate to vote this grant in. So there's email, you know, things going on. There's, I started an actual petition. I went like full activist on this. So getting involved with your community, going to these, you know, city council meetings, especially because, and I don't know how it is in your guys' cities, but like for us in Kenosha, because of the coronavirus, we can't attend these meetings in person anymore. And what they're doing, and they claim they're not, but it's absolute BS, but they have these technical issues where you can't call in for comments, right? So that's an issue. So it's like they're kind of sneaking these policies and these laws and these grants in, you know, all under the table, and it appears to be extremely shady. You know, and so you need to have people that are gonna run for, you know, alderman positions, circuit judges, sheriffs even. You know, we have a former county sheriff here in Milwaukee, David Clark. I mean, this guy's a train wreck in and of itself.
It was on Fox News too.
Yeah, and that's the thing, and like the rhetoric that he put out on Fox, right? And then he quits Fox because he's hoping, you know, his you know, best friend Trump is going to give him, you know, some job. You know, this is a man that has a documented history of death inside of his jails. This is a man who has a documented history of his, you know, being attacked for his speech, and then getting off under the guise of the First Amendment. But, you know, I film an event with him there where he's calling upon the Proud Boys. He's calling Kyle Rittenhouse, you know, the chosen one, and then inciting hundreds and hundreds of Trump supporters to create a people's rising and rise up. And at that actual event, you know, there's 20, 30 TPR members that came to kind of counter protest that. And because of David Clark's, you know, so-called free speech, he incited violence, and TPR members were attacked. One of them was arrested that day. You know, so I think that's the other thing too, is where we need to, and I want to be careful how I say this because I'm such a huge proponent for the First Amendment, but, you know, we need to understand and have clarification that free speech does not protect violent speech. It does not protect, you know, the inciting of violence. And there needs to be an understanding that even if there's an inference of you trying to incite some type of violence towards a person or a group of people, that can't be protected. So like the big argument of Google, Apple, and Amazon shutting down Parler, you know, first off, it's a private entity. That's not government interference, so they can do whatever they want. It's the same thing on my platform. I don't allow you to come on my platform and put a bunch of nonsense. I don't allow it. So Amazon's free to clear that, to do that too. But there needs to be actual accountability when it comes to what free speech is and what it's not. And if you're going to incite violence and you're going to talk about openly murdering people and causing great bodily harm, that's not protected speech. And that's, you know, so there needs to be more accountability. There needs to be more arrests, you know, and touching on like activists or streamers going missing. You know, we're seeing here in Wisconsin, I'm not sure how it is by you guys, where if you're protesting in Milwaukee, you get picked up by whatever law enforcement agency, and who knows who they are, whether it's local, whether it's FBI, US Marshals, you know, who knows. And you're not even being taken to a Milwaukee precinct. You're being taken to Wauwatosa, you're being taken to, you know, Waukesha, and then you're missing for hours. People getting their cell phones taken. You know, here's a tip for you guys, and I don't know if you're dealing with this currently, but where obviously we know that you need a warrant to go through a person's cell phone. So the workaround with law enforcement right now is that they're taking SIM cards out of the phone. And there's no precedent in the United States Supreme Court when it comes to the actual SIM card and whether a warrant is needed. There's only been a few cases that have been argued, and it's been held on a case-by-case basis. So I mean, there's a lot of stuff. Have a protest buddy, have a streamer buddy when you go out, because it's definitely unsafe.
Okay. And I think that we pretty much hit our time limit. So, I really appreciate everybody coming on and just really spreading awareness to the fact that all of these situations are happening all over. And for everybody that's out there watching, each one of these people are independent media. They all work by donations from their audience. They don't have corporate subscribers. They don't have advertisements. So it's important to remember that. So if you guys just want to go around and tell everybody where they can find you, just go ahead and do that.
So personally, I don't need any donations, but if you guys want to donate, Stream TV is awesome. And they're independent media and they're always out there. So if you guys want to give to the Tampa, Newport Richey, St. Pete area and help, that's definitely what page I would contact, and they can set that up for you.
As far as I go, you can find us on the 502 live streamers page on Facebook, or Summer Dickerson. You can look me up. And if you would like to donate, I would ask you to donate to our local Black Lives Matter group here in Louisville, Kentucky. I can get their information and post it on there, or our Kentucky Alliance, which is those are two of our biggest groups. So definitely donate to them. I don't need any donations.
If you would like to follow MFTW Media, you can find MFTW Media on Twitch, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Again, it's just MFTW Media, pretty simple. My personal stuff, you can find me at Mathew Ballard, 1T, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And as far as donations concerned, I definitely echo what Summer suggested. So first and foremost, donate to those groups, local Louisville BLM, Kentucky Alliance Against Racism. Also bail funds, like wherever your particular bail fund is for your community, whether that's Louisville or otherwise, definitely consider donating to those bail funds, because they're doing a lot of great work for those who are constantly being harassed via arrest from law enforcement across the country. But also, I will quickly mention, while we don't need them at this time, if you are so inclined to help out MFTW Media financially, you can do so at tip.mftw.media. But again, please only do that after you have donated to all these other organizations, because they're the ones who need it much, much more.
You can find Black Zebra Productions on Facebook. It's Black Zebra Pro on Instagram. And to donate on Venmo, it's Black Zebra. PayPal is Black Zebra Brain C, and Cash App is the Black Zebra. And we can post all of those for you as well. We, of course, really support and would appreciate any donations that can allow Black Zebra to continue sharing the voices of the community all over.
Jessica? She's still there?
Yep, sorry. So you can find me on just about any social media under the screen name Kalima Texas, KALI_MA_TX. If you go to my TikTok, I have a link tree posted there, which has links to all the local campaigns that I'm advocating for. I would just encourage you, if you're in the Texas area and you want to contribute to advocacy efforts for local BIPOC residents who are suffering because of systemic racism and white supremacy, then I would ask that you donate directly to one of those campaigns that we're advocating for in regards to the streaming and everything and the activism we're set. So just please contribute to the advocacy efforts.
Awesome. Okay, so and I am Michelle, so you can find me at Revolution Witness on Facebook or revolutionwitness.com, and really appreciate everybody tuning in today, and have a good day.
Thanks for putting this together, Michelle. Nice to meet all of you.